Fooling hearts night after day. Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end. The world's a stage, they run the flow. You clap on cue down in the front row. Faces, mass of stone. A hollow laugh that chills the bone. Puppets dangle strings unseen. Life's a trick, a cruel machine. Do you see it? Do you feel it? Or just believe it? Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end. The world's a stage, they run the flow. You clap on cue down in the front row. Running around the carousel, a twisted tune you know too well. Spinning faster, no escape. The curtain falls, a final shade.
Welcome to another episode of Breaking the System. Let's talk about 5 cents, right? You guys got 5 cents in your pocket? That's it. That's the starting point. Most people hear a number like that and they're just, let's move on. 5 cents doesn't feel like a hill to die on. Doesn't feel like a revolution. It sounds like change that you'd find in what? Under the couch cushion, right? In your car, in your center console. 5 cents. But history has a funny, almost cruel way of working. The biggest shifts in our lives rarely start with a bang. They start with what? Something small. Something that sounds reasonable. A tiny little adjustment that makes common sense almost, right? Until one day you wake up and realize the entire landscape has changed and you didn't even see the fence being built. And so tonight we're just looking at a bill in Illinois. We're looking at a pattern, a question that keeps popping up in different customs throughout history. At what point does safety stop being about protection and start being about control, right? It's that nasty word that most of us don't like, control. And when does that control turn into something else entirely? And we've seen this, or some of us seen it. Some of us woke up during COVID. Some of us have recently started to wake up in the last couple of years and realizing that there are certain people that want to control everything that we do, okay? And this is one of those. At least that's my perspective. So let's look at the fine print. Let's look at what is actually on the table. So in Illinois, there is a House bill called 4414. And if this passes by the year 2027, every single round of handgun ammunition in the state has to be serialized. Now let's pause and let's think about that logistics of that. We're not talking about a box of ammo. We're not talking about a batch of ammo. We're talking about every single individual bullet. So a standard box of 50, that's 50 unique IDs. A case of 1,000, that's 1,000 separate tracks in a database. Okay? And who holds the key to that database? Well, for all we know, it's the Illinois State Police. And those people will know who bought it, when they bought it, and exactly what specific rounds are sitting in your drawer. And then comes the infrastructure fee, that 5 cents per round to pay for the system itself, right? That can be a lot. Think about that. 5 cents per round in a tax off something that you can already buy. You should be already able to buy. And so there's a kicker with this. If you're caught with unmarked ammo after the deadline, that can be a criminal offense. Even just having it in your pocket in public. Think about all the hunters, right? Every round of ammunition after 2027 would have to have that unique ID, right? And that's pretty scary, that you could be a criminal just for having a round of ammunition in your pocket that is unmarked. Okay? So before you react, let's just sit with that idea for a second. This isn't just a tax. It's not. It's sold as a tax. It's bargained with as a tax, but it's not just a tax. It's a ledger of every single heartbeat of a hobby, of a gun right, or a means of survival. Right? It's a ledger that they're going to keep on every single one of those people. And you don't even have to have a gun. You could just have, for whatever means, you could just have ammunition. And you are on a ledger somewhere. Somebody is keeping tabs on what you're buying, where you're buying it, when you're buying it, and how much of those things that you're buying. Okay? And that is insane. So let's jump further into this. This is episode 44, the cost of control, the ammo tax in Illinois, and the pattern that nobody talks about. Okay? So, and we've seen this movie before. This is a movie that's been played out all too well. Okay? This isn't some brand new invention. Let's take a look in some history books. This is a classic play from the Policy Handbook. So let's look at alcohol in the early 1900s. Right? They didn't start by kicking down doors and smashing barrels. How did it start? They started by making it expensive. Through taxes, bureaucracy, they wanted to nudge, wink, wink, your behavior. And for a time it worked, sure. But it also built the foundation for some of the most violent black markets the country had ever seen. Do we want that? I don't think so. Let's also look at tobacco. Same script. Public health, behavior control, reduce harm. So over decades, those taxes, and look at how expensive cigarettes are. How much is a pack of cigarettes today, right? And then ask yourself, how much of that cigarette is a tax per state or per federal or whatever it is, okay? And so over decades, those taxes have climbed from pennies to over $5 a pack. That's insane that you have to pay $5 just in tax per pack of cigarettes. Not that I agree with smoking, because I don't. Like, I'm not a smoker, never have been, never will be. But isn't that like a right? If you want to smoke, that you should have the right to smoke. Like, it shouldn't cost you an arm and a leg and your kidney and your firstborn child just to have a smoke if you want one. Okay? And so it wasn't an overnight shock. It was a slow, steady boil, right? It was pennies, and then it's a few more pennies, and it's a few more pennies. And that's the way that all of these certain taxes work. Once you let the politician into your pocket, it becomes extremely hard to get that politician out of your pocket, right? They like the money, right? And so this pattern is always the same. They find a risk. They attach a cost to it, they build a tracking system, and then they wait for it to feel normal for us, for society. Okay? And so Illinois is not exactly starting from scratch here. If you're from Illinois, you know some of the crap that we deal with on the daily basis. But this is building on a foundation that's already been poured. In Cook County, it's a wonderful county. If you've never been there, you should visit. I'm being very sarcastic. I absolutely hate Cook County. But if you're in Cook County, you're already paying an extra $25 just to buy a firearm. And then you have the 2023 mandate requiring the registration of specific weapons with the state. It depends on how they deem them, right? What kind of name are they giving this weapon? Oh, it's a weapon of mass destruction, or, oh, it's an assault rifle, right? There's no such thing as an assault rifle. No such thing. Assault rifles don't exist. There's no such thing. Get that through your head, okay? But politicians, they label these specific weapons, and because they've labeled them, now you have to have them on registration with your names, your addresses, the serial numbers of all of these crazy weapons that you have, right? And when you zoom out, you realize this isn't a single law appearing out of thin air. It's a sequence. It's a staircase. And we're just looking at the next proverbial step, right? One of the greatest laws, not laws, but one of the greatest rights that we have as Americans is that we have the right to defend ourselves against foreign and domestic. Okay? If you're one of those people that have recently been waking up, one of the greatest threats is not from foreign invaders. It's not a foreign entity. It's domestic. Domestically. What have they been doing to us, we, the American people, domestically? Okay? And you really have to think about this, because if we don't have a way to fight back, to protect ourselves if the proverbial shit would ever hit the fan, right? If they take those rights away from us, right, to where you can't have guns, to where you can't protect yourself, they can do what they want. They can absolutely do whatever they want, right? So it's imperative that we try to keep the Second Amendment as blank as possible. Like, very little stipulations whatsoever. Because let's be honest, if you're a criminal, you're not going to abide by the law. So it doesn't matter if I pass one law or if I pass 100 laws. You're a criminal. You're not going to abide by them. So why would I pass 100 million laws unless it is not intended for the criminal? It is intended for the person that is abiding by the laws, okay? And so let's look at California and New York, wonderful states. So Illinois is not alone, and we can look at what they call the beta tests in other states. California already tried the background checks for ammo. They wanted to track the vendor, the buyer, and the transaction. New York pushed for the same thing, monitoring purchase patterns off of it, certain individuals. And if you look across the pond at the UK, they have a system that is incredibly tight. Quantities are capped. Licensing is a gauntlet. But the difference is They didn't get there through a series of 5-cent taxes. They had a massive, sudden national policy shift. And so the people allowed it. The people didn't fight back. They're like, okay, we're just going to conform to this. What about here in the States? Well, we're doing it the slow way, the incremental way, right? Not we. I mean, we vote for this stuff, but our politicians. Because it's little breadcrumbs. If you take the breadcrumb, oh, and there's another breadcrumb. And you take that breadcrumb, oh, and there's another breadcrumb. And the next thing you know, you're the mouse that has been trapped in the mousetrap, and there's no way for you to get out of that. And that's where we're basically at this point with a lot of these gun laws, is that we see another breadcrumb, and we take the bait. And before long, we won't have any gun rights whatsoever. And so there's a philosophical divide. And this is where the room gets split. On one side, the argument is simple. If we can track the bullet, we can solve the crime, which would be amazing, right? We can find the casing at the scene, we check the database, we find the shooter. It sounds very logical. It sounds like a solution. And that's what they want. They always want it to sound like a solution, okay? But let's look at the other side, because I want you to really look at the other side. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. We always should look at both sides of every argument, okay? So the counter is just as blunt. The guy planning a crime isn't going to the store to register his serial number, right? That's the criminal that we just talked about. And if they are, they're absolutely stupid. They're just signing their own death warrant. Like, here, lock me up. Boom, here's my signature, right? So what are they going to do? What are the criminals going to do? They're going to go to the black market. They're going to go across state lines. So who does this system actually track? It tracks the person that follows the rules. It tracks the citizen who wants to stay on the right side of the law. And that's the tension. So are we solving crime, or are we just cataloging law-abiding citizens? And so, we have to ask these questions from our politicians. And if we don't agree with our politicians, we either need to vote them the hell out or stop them dead in their tracks through protesting or whatever it is, right? Peaceful protesting. We don't want to get violent. We haven't reached that point in society yet. I think we can still communicate our differences, right? But like I said, it's not solving the crime. It's not punishing the criminal. It's cataloging. It's criminalizing law-abiding citizens. And so let's be honest for a second. This doesn't actually stop a bullet from being fired. It doesn't. And history says probably not. Crime doesn't usually play by the house rules. It never has. The black market exists because there's a vacuum. And so it doesn't matter whether if it's booze or drugs or ammo. If there is a demand, someone somewhere will fill it. And they won't be using a serialized database with their names attached to it and when and where they bought it or how they're going to do it, right? So if this doesn't stop the bad guy, who does it hit? Once again, we've got to ask these questions. So what's the human cost in all this? It hits the people who are actually in the system. You and I, the taxpayer, okay? Once again, it hits the person that goes to the range every weekend to train, to be responsible. And suddenly they're training, what? It costs double. It hits the family in the rural part of the state who relies on themselves because the nearest police station is maybe 30 minutes away. And so if you're getting robbed or mugged or house broken into, you have the right to defend yourself. What are you going to do if they have a gun? You going to grab a knife? You're dead. You going to grab a baseball bat? You're dead, right? The police are 30 minutes away. You don't have 30 minutes. You have literal seconds, okay? And it also hits the lower income families or lower income individuals who's just trying to stay prepared but gets priced out of their own safety. And we see this time and time and time again. It's not going to affect a rich person. It's not going to affect a person with money. It's going to be detrimental to those people who are poor or impoverished or right on that line to where they can reasonably afford maybe a handgun or a shotgun and a few rounds, but now they can't because there's an extra tax on every bullet that they buy and every time they shoot their firearm. Okay? And so this is where the high-level policy meets the kitchen table. This is where the 5 cents starts to feel like a wall, and it does. It feels like a proverbial wall that has been put up against tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. And so history doesn't tell us not to make laws. Let's be honest. We have to have laws. Without laws, there's chaos. Okay? And that's why we have to be very, very careful with every freedom that we have been given by God and explained and wrote out in the Constitution and the Declaration and all of the other American places of literature that we turn to. Okay? And the laws that are already on the books, we have to watch how they grow and how they change over time. Because the first version of a policy is almost never the final one. Taxes will go up. They will. Databases will get wider and bigger. And they will. And the definition that they change on every word all the time, look at all of the definitions that they changed during COVID. And that definition of illegal will get broader. And it happens so gradually that we just adjust to it. Like we're adjusting to the internet and we're adjusting to the machines and we're going to adjust to AI. And so we're going to adjust to these laws and we're either going to fit in and we're going to pay that price, right? Over and over and over. And as it becomes exponentially more and more expensive in the future, and not only for us, but for our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids, to the point where maybe a single shotgun shell costs $30. Sounds crazy, but it could happen. A single round of 5.52 or a single round of 22 or 308 might be $30. It sounds insane, but look how high the prices have gotten, and we're just going to add another tax onto it. Not to mention the sales tax that you're already paying on top of that. Okay? This is an extra tax on the backside of every single bullet that you would buy legally in the state of Illinois. And so 5 cents. 5 cents. That is the price of this conversation. That's it, 5 cents. It's small enough that a lot of people is going to ignore it. And for a lot of people, that's exactly what they're going to do. I'm just going to pay it. It's just 5 cents, right? It's just 5 cents. Let's have this conversation. Is this really what we want to do? Is this really what we want to pass? Because history doesn't care how a shift starts. It cares where it ends, and we've seen this pattern before, and we know how it plays out. Look at alcohol. Look at tobacco. How expensive has tobacco gotten? My God. Right? So the question isn't whether a bill is good or bad. That's too simple for the world that we live in. The real question is, when we build a system in the name of safety, who gets to decide when we've gone far enough? And that isn't just for the Second Amendment. It's also for the First Amendment. When is enough enough? When do we pass a bill that stops us from having the ability to have free speech? Because you can't say this, that, or the other. you can't talk about this group or that group, or you can't be anti-Christian or anti-Semitic or anti-anything, because that will be breaking the law. Right? So who gets to decide when we've gone far enough with the bills that are currently on the books? And if the answer is nobody, then where does it actually stop? If no one is going to be accountable for when these bills actually stop, like 5 cents becomes 25 cents. Well, that's enough. We need to stop. There's nobody on the books that will do that. So when and where would it actually stop? And I don't think it would. So I'm going to leave you with this question, because we always leave with a question. And I really want you to think on this, just like we've thought about all the other questions that we've left you with. What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to give up just to feel a little bit safer? And with that, this is Breaking the System. You guys have a blessed night. Peace, and we'll see you next time.